God's favorite. I'm laying down in his arms, and he's wiping tears from my troubled brow and keeping me safe from harm. Oh,
Tripp Jam fans, Tripp Jam fans, have I got a real treat for you today. You are just going to be so blessed by what you're about to hear, because I have the privilege of sitting here today with Brian Houston. Now, you may or may not know Brian, but if you don't know him, you need to get to know him, because this man is worth listening to. He's full of wisdom, he's full of charm, he's witty, he's a guy that you really would like to hear and you'd like to get to know better. So I'm excited that I've got to meet you today. Thank you for coming, Brian.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming, and you're very welcome. Thank you for taking your time and coming here and sharing your time with us, and just sharing your heart and thoughts. Yeah, so I'm, on behalf of people that may not know you, go introduce yourself to us.
My name's Brian Houston. I'm from Belfast, not Australia. Often a lot of confusion about that. And yeah, I grew up here. I was a carpenter in the shipyard. Became a production manager before all that ended. And then had a couple of other jobs in the construction industry. And when that all closed down, I became a musician at the age of 26.
Wow.
And began to do music and run sound for bands and do that whole kind of thing, and went for record deals and all of that stuff. And then in the mid-90s, a friend played a song of mine that we'd recorded as a demo and put out on a CD. He played it on the radio, local radio, and someone phoned in and asked for it to be played again. And bit by bit, it became a success on the radio, which led to me doing like shows with Van Morrison. And so in that, since then, I've been, I guess, all over the world and several other places, just following the music and making independent records. At one point I had a Christian record deal. Most of my music is mainstream, not necessarily Christian in nature. But I had a record deal and went to America and Canada and kind of did that thing.
So let me ask you then. So in your song, "We Don't Need Religion," and you said I was a shipyard worker, I was a shirker.
Yeah.
Shirker. So you actually were those things.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, both a shipyard worker and a shirker.
And a shirker.
You know, like they announced yesterday, I think, that the Belfast shipyard has built their first boat since 2003.
Wow.
And my wife said to me, "Flip me, I had no idea they were building ships down there. How many people work in the shipyard?" And I said, "About half of them." So that's the way, you know, nobody really, I mean, you didn't kill yourself down there, you know. I enjoyed it for what it was, but the only reason I was doing that was because people told me I couldn't do music. You know, no one did that then. No one, as far as I'm aware, no one had ever put out an independent CD until we did it. And
Wow.
maybe that's, and maybe there was someone else, I don't know. But back then the model was you went to England and you got a record deal, or you went to Dublin and tried to get a record deal. But the idea of putting out a record on your own was a completely new concept.
Like today, self-publishing books is huge. Everybody does it. But before, it wasn't too common.
And nowadays everybody makes a record or has a computer or is, you know, uploading stuff to different SoundCloud and YouTube and everything else. But back then, to actually produce a CD and for it to get on the radio as an independent was, I guess, not exactly revolutionary, but certainly novel, you know, at the time.
Wow.
And that led to a lot of local press and local TV. And like I say, opening slots for Elvis Costello, Chuck Berry, Robert Plant. But then when I got the Christian record deal, the first event I ever played was in Franklin, Tennessee, with a bunch of people I had never really heard of. And I came out and I opened for a guy. I had 1 hour to play, and as soon as I hit the first chord, the machine that projects the words broke. And so there was just me and 2,500 Americans who didn't know who I was, and my guitar, and we just sang together for an hour. I still get emails about that from people still saying, I was at that event. I've never forgotten it. So
Wow.
I've never forgotten it either for all the other reasons. But the person I was opening for then was relatively unknown, but that was Chris Tomlin. So I've ended up doing stuff with him and in the Christian World, Third Day, and Michael W. Smith, and Delirious, and all kinds of people who were big in that period. But
Honestly, I was reading a little bit on your website, and the two people that stood out to me that I was real impressed. I was like, wow, Jason Upton and Kevin Prosch.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin Prosch for me was a life-changing thing. That happened in around the mid-90s, late 90s. Yeah, so I'd been in the band. We tried to get a record deal. That hadn't really worked out. I didn't know what I was going to do. And a guy who just called me 5 minutes ago, he told me at that point, you should go down and try and get playing guitar with this guy, So
With Kevin?
yeah, because he came to Belfast. And so I went down with my guitar,
I'm so jealous.
Telecaster and little amplifier.
I love
And I knew the guy that was booking the gig, and it was in our church. So I said to him, hey, can I play guitar? And he'd be like, sure. So I showed up, and then I overheard Kevin and his manager and the organizer. And the conversation was, what's he doing here? We don't need a guitar player. Kevin plays guitar. We don't need him. But everyone was too nice to say to me, we don't need you, right? And I just blagged my way and played. And so then we ended up rehearsing and playing a gig that night. And then that was a Friday. And then we ended up playing Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, off Monday, played Tuesday night. And Kevin left the next day.
Wow.
And but he said to me, would you come on the road with me? And I said, yeah. But he never followed through on that. Okay. And I kind of held that against him for a couple of years. Irish people, what we do well, we hold a grudge. So, but I mean, every night I played with him. So up to that point, I had produced albums for people like Rob and Mark, and to me, worship music was less than regular music. Worship music was, it's strange saying that now because worship music has eclipsed all other kinds of Christian music. But at that point, worship was the least cool music there was as a Christian artist. And the only people who played worship were people, my impression was people who weren't good enough to get a gig anywhere else, right? And I was very elitist about it. And I hadn't seen anything that changed my mind. And even when I produced albums for people who were very anointed, the music itself did not ever impact me. And I'd sung on the In White records and different other people's worship records, but it wasn't my thing. I seen myself as a mainstream artist, and that was the end of it. And Kevin played, I played with him, and every night I played with him, I just wept. And I couldn't understand this. But for the first time in my life, music had been, I guess, a hobby. It had been a source of income. It had been my living. It had been my dream. I was making a bit of money from it as well as being a carpenter. But it was never transcended this realm. I enjoyed being in a worship environment, and I knew it was slightly different, but music itself had never, ever spoken to me in that way. And then when I played with him, all of a sudden, there was like this Jacob's Ladder experience. It was like heaven touching earth.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as they played his CD for us, so we hadn't ever heard the music before. We're setting up in the rehearsal, and they're playing the CD through the monitors. That was the first I'd heard the music, and I was thinking, well, this is really good. This is really good music. And I really dug it. It had that sort of black gospel thing going on, prophetic thing going on. And so I was more than happy to be there. But we played that night, and next day we met again to go through the stuff. And Kevin said, what did you think of last night? And people were like, oh, yeah, it was good. It was good. Enjoyed it, And then someone said to him, well, what did you think? And he said, we just played. We didn't worship. So he began to teach us the difference. Now, even though I'd had that experience the night before where I was weeping, I didn't understand what he meant. And then he began to teach us about entering in and teaching us about the song of the Lord and the prophetic song and all this stuff. And then that night we played and he was like, now we're getting, now we're getting closer to what's going on.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, he was like that was definitely, if you like, spoiled. It spoiled my career path because up to that point, it was very much, I make music, it goes on the radio, I want to be a rock and roll singer, that's the end of it. Now all of a sudden there was this other path.
Keith Green said the same thing.
Oh, really?
He wanted to be a secular star. He just wanted to make music that pleased a lot of people and he could make a living
I
at
just
it.
wanted to be famous. That was the beginning and the end of it.
wanted-
Have a
yeah.
lot of money and be famous and make a living from music.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. But all of a sudden there was a fly in the ointment and all of a sudden there was like, but this other thing, you know, and to this day, to be honest, 100% honest, I still really wrestle with this.
Wow.
Because part of me absolutely loves the anointing, the presence, when God manifests with his people. The tears roll down my face and, you know, I enter in and I love it. It doesn't even matter if it's not very good. You know what I mean?
You can tell by some of your songs. You know, when I listen to some of your songs, oh my gosh, you get caught up into the Lord's presence, you know, and you just lose focus of you and your voice, and you're consumed with just a passion and love for the Lord, you know, and you're not religious about it, which I love. You know, I mean, what does that mean? Not religious. I guess what I'm trying to say is you come from a place of passion in the heart, you know, and religion more comes from the mind, right? So you know, the Lord says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, then mind and soul and
Right,
strength.
okay.
So the heart has to come first.
Yeah.
And that's what I get from you when I listen to your Christian songs. I hear your heart and a real love for him. You know, it's not a theological, religious kind of love. It's an actual, genuine compassion and care for God and for his people.
Well, I think, I mean, like how I get into faith, my mom was Northern Ireland Protestant, which is more of a political stance than a religious thing. My dad was a communist, which we didn't know until he died, and we found his Communist Party book. He was a member of the Communist Party, which explained why he was always quoting Karl Marx, and he never, you know, in Ireland, like we have a saying, you know, he was talking when he should have been listening. My dad would frequently come home with wounds on his face, fat lip, and blood, and you know, shirt stained with blood because he was talking when he should have been listening, right? And sharing his, I guess, Marxist views. And he was anti-Orange Order, anti-religion, anti-Masonic. And all those things, when he was a young man, would have made a way for you. But he chose to swim against the stream because he disagreed with it all. So then I'm growing up in a Protestant estate in the middle of the bombs going off.
In Belfast.
Yes. And but my father is playing Irish music, not loyalist music. So I'm listening to songs about Irish rebellion in a Protestant estate.
Wow.
And I'm reading books like My Part in Ireland's Struggle by Dan Breen, which is a IRA book, because these are things my dad had lying around the house.
Right.
And yet he came from the Protestant side of town and was raised technically as a Protestant. In fact, my mother was in love with a Catholic man called Jimmy Fagan. And her dad and Jimmy Fagan's dad got together and broke up my mom and Jimmy Fagan because they were Protestant and Catholic. But my grandfather was okay with my mom marrying my dad, who came from the right side of the tracks from a religious perspective.
Little did he know.
Ironically, my dad was teaching us about Irish republicanism just by osmosis. So for me, an act of rebellion in my house would have been to go to the church, because my dad was like, religion is the opiate of the masses. Do not go near that church. One end of my street, there was a school, brand new primary school. The other end, literally the other end of the street, Ravenswood Park in East Belfast, there was a church. And in the school, they were training you how to march and become a paramilitary. So if you went down there in the evening, you could join up, you could get yourself a Black Harrington and a beret, and off you go. You're on the fast track to go into jail, which my friends and people like that did. But if you went to the other end of the street, you had middle class people playing badminton and bowls who didn't want to know the likes of us, because my mum and dad smoked 60 a day each. We were little street urchins. When we showed up to the church, they were like, "You're not welcome here."
Wow.
Right? But on a cold winter's night, where are you going to go? You know, you're just looking for somewhere to go. And so I said to my mom, "Can I join up, you know, the UDA or whatever it was?" And she was like, "Don't be daft. You're not joining them guys." So she was smart enough to redirect me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, you might have been afraid of things, but there was nothing as scary as my mom, right? And if she said no, she meant no, right? You weren't going. So I went up to the other end of the street, and it turned out they were looking for someone in the Boys Brigade, which I wasn't a member of, but they were looking for someone to sing every year they'd have a display. And they needed a singer, and I wanted to sing. So,
did you ever have formal training
No.
in your singing? It's just natural. It's just you just.
to this day, I don't know what the notes in a chord are. I can't tell you what the notes on the fretboard are.
Wow.
I just play all that by ear, I guess, and shapes, you know, geometrically. Like a guy taught me, you play a box there, you play a triangle there, and that's how I
Are
learned.
you kidding me?
No, that's how I learned.
How many instruments do you play?
I play the guitar, and I play bass, and I play mandolin. I can do enough keyboard in the studio to record a thing, you know, but I can't. I'm not a keyboard player. If you asked me to accompany myself, I couldn't do it. But I can get by.
But self-taught. You just picked up a guitar,
Yeah.
started fiddling around, and then you're where you're
The
at
church
now.
offered a teaching thing, and I went along to that, and there was 6 or 7 kids
Yeah.
and a teacher
Yeah.
and a guitar.
Okay.
So he would show you a G, then they pass that guitar to the next kid.
Wow.
He tried the G, and then they passed that guitar. And it went around. Nobody had an instrument like.
Wow.
And so I was thinking, this is going to take forever. I can't do this. And we had this old thing lying in the house, which was an old, one of those guitars where the pickguard it's an acoustic guitar, but the pickguard was screwed on to the front of it, like a real cheap guitar. And there was an electric guitar of some kind, which had 3 strings on it. And so somehow I got some strings, and I got some guy who knew how to play guitar to tune it. And then I got a book, and I was obsessed with Elvis. And this book there was an Elvis record, and this book was the songs from that record. So I knew the songs, I knew how to sing the song. So all I had to do was sit down with the book and figure out, because I could sing the song and I knew the words, I just figure out what shape, because it was one of those books that didn't just put the letter of the chord, it showed you the shape of the chord and where to put your fingers. And I just kept at it. And after about 6 weeks, I could play something.
Man.
And then that's how we did it.
Golly.
So yeah, that kept me out of the EDA and kept me out of jail, I guess.
Well,
you know.
and God had his hand on you.
Well, I could feel God. So because there was no religion around me, and when you say I'm not religious, it's because I didn't know religion. I didn't know what it
You
was,
didn't grow up in.
and I never was forced to go to a church. And my mom sent me to Sunday school, but the trousers she made me wear itched my legs. And I said I didn't want to go anymore because of the trousers. and I didn't get along. It turned out my now wife, her father was the teacher and he didn't want us there either. We were nightmares. Can you imagine the kind of kids we were, like smelly little poor kids, and did not fit the thing.
Yeah.
So when I said I didn't want to go no more, my mom was like, "Fine, don't go." So I didn't go anymore.
Same thing happened to me. My mom got this weird idea, man, when I was like 10 or 11, and she says, "You're going to learn ballet."
Death by ballet.
With the tights and all. And I went to like 2 or 3 classes. I was the only boy there, and I was so embarrassed. And I finally said, "Mom, I'm not going back. You'll have to drag me. I'm not going to go."
Especially with the tights, you know.
Yeah, it was so embarrassing.
Wow.
I've noticed listening to you through the years, seriously, you are adept at so many different styles of music. I couldn't pigeonhole you. I couldn't say, okay, this is the Brian Houston sound, you know, because I've heard you do rock and pop and country. I mean, you do country fantastic.
Thank you.
I mean, your Hank Williams album,
See,
you know,
yeah.
fantastic.
Thank
I mean,
you.
really gave real honor to him and that genre, you know, with this, you know, you did such a good job with that. And so how would you describe yourself? Like if you had to choose one of your styles, what would you prefer? What would you say?
Well, I mean, the truth is,
Blues?
I started out wanting to be like in a rock band.
Okay, right.
But I've never really truly been a rocker in the sense of my father would have played Hank Williams, Chris Christopherson, Tom Paxton, John Prine, all that kind of country singer-songwriter music. And he played it off for reel to reel, and he would get my brother and I to listen to it. And then if we didn't, he would ask us what we thought the words meant. And I was like 6. And if I didn't get it, he would rewind it and play it again. And then he would pause it and explain.
Oh, that's nice.
The writer was... Now, my dad wasn't musical, but he was really into music.
I'm impressed he spent time with you doing anything. No, well, my dad never did, you know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that was in our very early years. After a while, his alcoholism just like obliterated that. But back then, that was, I guess, him sharing his obsession with us. Plus, he was using the music. He was picking songs that were targeted against my mom. And he would find it hilarious to play us songs that were designed to get us to think differently about our mother. And our mother was playing the same game, because on a Saturday we'd go to my granny's or my nanny's and we'd go down there, and all my aunties, it was a 9x9, you know, 2 up, 2 down, tiny little house. All my aunties were there, their husbands, all my cousins, my granda, my granny.
On your mother's side?
Yes, everybody packed into this tiny 9x9 room. Wow. Everybody was smoking, so you were smoking whether you wanted to smoke or not. My granda trying to eat a fry off his knee, you know, and sharing the food with the kids and all that stuff. And then my aunties would gather around me and my brother, and they would say, now listen, your mom is right, your dad is wrong, you side with your mom, your father is a bully. We were indoctrinated every single week. So when my mom left my dad, which she did many times, she would just pack us up, grab a bag of Weetabix and some groceries, and we'd go to my auntie's. And we'd spend the weekend there. And then my dad would talk her into coming back, and we'd go home.
Wow.
And there was a cycle.
So just from what I read on your bio on your website, so I can't speak, you know, but it seems to me like you have a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
It seems to me like you deeply love your wife, and when she was ill, you stood with her and you did all you could to help her get through it. And so do you ever wonder sometimes, how did you end up with such a healthy marriage?
Oh, I don't have to wonder. I can tell you exactly.
With your parents,
well, it's not down to me. I can tell you that. It's down to the fact that my wife is a legend, and we've been together since we're 15.
Wow.
But she's the one who puts up with me, right? And she's the one who has many reasons to walk away but doesn't.
Yeah. Me too.
And she has taken this adventure with me, you know. Yeah. In fact, she said when I was starting music, she said, we take this journey together or we don't do it. And so that's kind of been our...
So the opposite of your parents, like, in other words.
Yeah. And it was me and her against the world, you know. And so that was our attitude. And... but anyway, I guess we've kind of corrupted the timeline.
But sorry, so the style of music, though.
Yeah, but I could feel like, as a child, I could feel God talking to me. Okay. I didn't know it at the time, but there was a voice telling me what to do. And I was listening to that voice, which probably isn't theologically correct, because, you know, I've always been confused about this idea that your spirit's dead until it's impacted by Jesus, and then it comes alive, and you're born again. To me, there was a voice talking to me. There was God speaking to me, calling me.
Yes.
and telling me, do this, do that, stop and help that woman cut her grass. And I would listen to that voice, right?
Wow.
And so there was this sense in which when I got to about 12 or 13, I said to a friend in school who was a Christian, how do I become a Christian? Well, you pray. So I prayed. I said, what do I do now? Well, you read the Bible. So I read the Bible. I didn't feel any different. And it wasn't until a few years later, whenever I was at a tent meeting, I think, and the guy said, come to the front. Well, I went to the front every night, just as I am, just as I was last night, just as I was the night before. That was me. I just wanted all in, and I wanted everything to change. But for me, it's been a progressive journey of revelation, if you like, of God gradually invading every single part of my life. Till even in 2012, I was in Chicago, and he kept knocking me down on the floor. And I spent the Thursday night, all day Friday, all Friday night, all day Saturday night, on the carpet at this event. And only on the Saturday night, when the whole thing was wrapped up and everybody was packing up to go, I'm still lying there. And I said, God, what is all this about? What is all this lying on the ground shaking stuff about? And he said, when you were a kid and there was a guy beat you up at school, there was this guy called Kirk Hagan, beat me up really bad, pulled my hair out as he was kicking me, holding my hair and kicking at the roots and pulling it out in chunks. The Lord said, you need to know I was with you when he was doing that. And I began to cry because of that. And then as I was crying, he said, but you need to know I've always been with you, and I love you, and I love you. And he just kept saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it got more and more intense. And I'm lying there on my own on the floor. And there was it's like his hands went around my heart, and my heart began to burn.
Oh my!
And I could just feel this
What a graphic picture
of love just invading me. So if you want to know when I had a born again experience, that's it. But by then I'd been journeying with God a very long time.
So he knew ahead of time that you would come to that point.
Well, yeah. Exactly, because he starts at the end and works forward. But so it's kind of like there's always been this sense in which I felt like I was different, chosen, picked out from very early age. And part of that was ego. Part of it is being an artist. Part of it is having an orphan heart. But I think part of it also was the fact that he was saying, I have my hand on you.
Wow.
And so I'm very fortunate that I met my wife. I'm very fortunate that her temperament has ridden out the ups and the downs, and she can take all of that so easily and in her stride. Because if it was the other way around and she was me, I wouldn't be able to cope with her ups and downs the way she copes with mine.
Wow.
Yes,
but you did pray, though, you told me before we started recording. You said you prayed a prayer that was something like, Lord, let me be broken by the same things that you're broken by.
Break my heart with what breaks yours. Yeah.
Break my heart with what breaks yours.
Can I get a refund on that prayer? Can I bring that? Can I return it? Yeah, that's a very scary prayer. I also asked him for wisdom. And, if you want your heart broken by what breaks his, then don't be surprised when your child turns out to be a gay man. Don't be surprised when your wife gets cancer. And, if you want to walk through wisdom and you want to have something to say and that has any meaning to it or weight or gravitas, then don't be surprised if you live a very rough life. If you're a prophetic person, don't be surprised if your life is literally a prophetic word. That the things you're feeling and sensing and going through and experiencing.
Like one of the prophets, God told him to marry a whore, right? A prostitute. So his whole life was a prophetic sign, a prophecy.
Exactly. And I feel like that's what God did with me. That my whole life is a word. My whole life. I mean, it's helpful to look at it as a work of art. But if it is a work of art, it feels like it should be the portrait of Dorian Gray up in an attic.
Um, but isn't God amazing that out of that, pain and suffering that you're talking about, God brings beauty, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, I think his heart, you see, obviously he has begun a good work and he will see it through to completion. And that good work, it says Jesus, for the prize set before him, he endured. And, endurance, if you want to have patience, don't be surprised if it takes a lot longer for something to happen than you want it. Don't be surprised if you're always in the line of traffic that never goes first. Don't be surprised if you pick a line at Tesco's and your line doesn't move and the cash register breaks.
Yeah.
Don't ask for patience then. Ask for speed. Right? So, but we want these fruits of the Spirit, right? I want those fruits in my life. I want self-control.
Right.
Well, then don't be surprised if you have a temper to control, right? So it's like, to become an overcomer, you have to have something to overcome.
There you go. Yep.
And for me, the hurdles just keep getting bigger. And I'm hoping that good work that he has begun is gradually transform. Well, I know it's transforming me. Because I know that he is gradually showing me my foolishness. He shows me, like years ago when I was in the mainstream, and I still do that, but back when I was just in it and I was backstage and there was dressing room writer as all the drinks, the alcohol, the water, beer, whatever you're into, tea and coffee, food, snacks, hot meal. That's called a dressing room writer. Technical writer is all the spec that you want, your microphones and all that crap. Well, when I was doing church things, I had a dressing room writer that I would ask for. I was embarrassed. I began to realize that me asking for a dressing room writer was causing great expense and stress to the person putting on the event. Sometimes great offense if you asked for a bottle of red wine. That I was being a burden, and I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to be a blessing. And there's no such thing as a dressing room writer anymore, because even if you word it nicely, someone may still take that on as a burden. So I leave that. And my prayer is that when I leave a place, that there's an essence of Jesus, a fragrance that's left behind.
Amen.
That's what I want.
That's it.
That's my desire.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
And I play bars and I play some rough, very, very rough places, a lot of bad language and, profanity. And that's just on the stage. I play a lot of very, very rough places, and I feel sorry for the bar staff because I'm there on a Saturday night or a Friday night, whatever. They're there 5 nights a week.
Right.
They've got to deal with that humanity 5 nights a week.
Right.
And they in my head, the movie's running, this is all career development. This is you being a better artist. That, somewhere around the corner, there's an influential person who's going to think you're, I'm telling myself all kinds of stuff to get through it. The bar person, they're just working there. That's just their life. And sometimes those bar people are as immersed in that lifestyle as their customers, and so it's not a struggle for them.
Like Piano Man, Billy Joel,
Yeah.
He's playing the. Or you ever heard John Fisher, Johnny's Cafe?
I haven't heard
Yeah,
that.
he talks about, like, if Jesus were here today, he'd probably be down at the local cafe or the local pub, rather than the local church,
It's funny that, I think he is so incarnate that he is so immersed, so invisible, and yet so present. And sometimes I'm playing there and I'm thinking, like as I walk in, as I'm unloading from the car and walking in, there's a massive downer sometimes, you're feeling, oh, is this my life, This isn't nice. I don't want to be here. I'd rather be watching Match of the Day or whatever. But in those times when it gets really bad, then I go in and I go into gratitude and I go into worship. And I may be singing Hotel California, but I'm thinking, thank you, Lord, for providing some money tonight. This is better than working for Amazon. You know, this is still playing a show.
Yes.
This is still a gig.
You're
and you're
supporting your
providing
family
for me. Yeah. And so thank you for this. And so I'm worshiping. And sometimes I wonder, without, I don't know the language for it, but I wonder, is he incarnate in that moment? Because you're his and he's in you. And when you turn your focus on to him, as he then manifests in your soul, do the people in the room go, there's something different about this?
Wow.
I don't know, but I do know that there's something about the gift he's put in me, that the feedback I get from the people is good. And I think, is it him they're seeing? I hope it's him they're seeing. I hope it's him they're sensing, right? Mm-hmm. I hope that they can see past the swear words and past the rough accent and past the energetic delivery or past the exterior, and they can see that there is something of him.
Yeah. Jesus rocked his world, rocked the religious establishment by eating and drinking with sinners. Mm-hmm. He went to a sinner's house and entered a sinner's house, and that just caused them to reject him completely because he actually spent time with sinners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, I was watching a thing the other day about the Jesus Revolution movie.
Yeah.
And the guy was talking, and he was talking to the American audience. He was an American. And he was talking that very language. And he was describing the idea of meeting with people in the real world. And he was making it sound like it was radical. And I was like, really? You have to tell the church this? Has the church become so subcultural and so divorced from society, so sanitized, so whitewashed, so whatever has happened to out of the God-given fear to protect their children, did we evolve a culture of music, language, clothing, literally a subculture of people who have become so detached, and over generations of homeschooling and retreating and gradually trying to protect the
Insular.
children. Yes. Yeah. And the instinct's good. I'm not saying it's not a good instinct. You're trying to protect your children. I get that.
Yeah.
I would do anything to protect my children, give my life. But did we on some level surrender?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And did we somehow form a language that is made up of English, but it's actually a dialect of Christian chatter? Mm-hmm. And that these people are now like sinners. What as if we're not,
Yeah.
but we are. We're just sinners who've seen a bit of light, and we're trying to walk in that light.
Yeah, like Bob Carlyle has a song, "We Fall Down," and he says that where saints are just sinners that get back up again when they fall down. Yeah.
And do I think he wants to be there? I mean, I heard a preacher middle of last night and this morning. God can only do. There's aspects of God's will he can only do by realizing the desire of your heart, Ran. See, the desire of your heart, which if we go back to the beginning, was, I want to be rich and famous, right? If God gives you the desire of your heart, okay, well, you can read that two ways. I've got a desire, God's going to give me it. That's one way of reading it. The other way is, I didn't have any desire till God put one in me. Right? And the desire he put in me was music, rich and famous. And this preacher said, when you say yes to the dream in your heart, you invite the Holy Spirit, the Word of God, to come and begin to develop you into the person you need to be to achieve that dream.
Wow.
And if you don't achieve the dream, or you haven't achieved the dream, it's only because you're not there yet. It's not because God's up there going, ha ha ha, you know, the cosmic sadist. It's not that. It's that, no, you see, he works in process. And you're not there yet, kid.
Wow.
I've got a few more things you need to grow into. And once you do, you'll be fine.
There you go.
And, you know, and if that takes your whole life, well, hey,
Well,
it's kind of you in charge of the development, right?
yeah, we live in a society today that's instant gratification, you know, and things have to be done. I want it and I want it now. Wendy and Mary have a song, Instant Breakfast, you know, and it talks about, you know, even in Christianity, we like our fast food sermons, you know, we like everything, you know, quick and tasty, and, you know, we don't want anything that, you know, would make us work at all for it or have to invest or have to, you know, but anyway, I just wanted to mention real quick, your website is
BrianHouston.com.
BrianHouston.com, okay. And I did want to say my personal favorite album of yours is Jesus and Justice. And,
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. And then one, you don't remember this probably, but back a long time ago, it was probably 2009 or whatever, I contacted you from London. And I said, Brian, I love Jesus and Justice, and I lost my copy of it, and I can't find it. And could you send me a copy? Because I'm kind of a DJ at times, and I share music, and I need another copy, and you did. You sent it to me.
That's good.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you for money.
Yeah.
It must have been one of my good days. My more like Jesus days.
Yeah, you actually, you didn't charge me, and you sent me a copy of Jesus and Justice, and I mean, that's my personal favorite album of yours. And so anybody listening, I highly recommend, you know, Jesus and Justice if you want to start with an album from you.
Yeah. It's weird. It's such a disappointment, that album.
Really?
Well, from the angle of being a Christian worship leader, it's a total failure.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And I think I've made a bit of a habit of that. Because there's songs. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a gem of an album. You know, like, and every artist has that, to me, that mountaintop, you know, like where it's rare that even famous artists put out an album where every single song hits, every single song just you love. You're like, oh, it's great, you know, because even really famous artists, you know, like it's hit or miss. You know, like they'll have some songs that are absolute gems. You're like, wow, and that sells the album, usually one single or the whole album. But then mixed in with the really great songs, there's some good.
Well, the Police are very famous for that. Most of their albums are.
Yeah.
And then you've Message in a Bottle, Walking on the Moon,
Yeah.
Right on the Night, and Bed's Too Big Without You. The rest of the records, not much. Yeah.
And so when I come across like Jesus and Justice, in my opinion, there's not a misstep on the album.
Well, that's
Where Am I Ring? Where Am I Ring?
Yeah.
You know, what a fantastic song to play for your wife, and you know, I played it on my show.
Wow.
And
Nice.
I played the whole album on my show at different times. You know, at each song at different times. But yeah, so what would your albums? Which one would you recommend? What's a personal favorite for you? That's like asking which child is your favorite child. But,
Yeah, the one I had the most fun making was Gospel Road.
Gospel Road.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the reason that record got made was I'd made a record called 3 Feet from Gold.
Okay.
And it got 3 reviews. And the first 2 reviews were unbelievable. They made me cry. They were so good, so positive. And I thought at the time that this is it. This is the breakthrough record. Look at those reviews. And then the 3rd review came out, which was the only one that was actually printed in a magazine. And the other 2 were online. And it tore it apart. And it tore me apart along with it. And I was so devastated, not only by the review, but by the fact that I was personal friends with the guy who printed the magazine, and he printed it. And I was shocked that he didn't even say, Brian, this review isn't good, you know, let you know. So it hurt me a lot. I was really, really upset. And at that point, I was at a low ebb, and somehow these little gospel songs were popping into my head, and I was just recording them on my phone or whatever. And my wife said to me, you should just go to the studio and just try to do one song a day. Don't try to make a whole record in a day, which I was always trying to do. And so it took 3 months actually. It wasn't a day, but each song took probably a week. And it was a tribute in a way to Elvis, because every song had that 50s gospel thing going on with the backing vocals. It's the first time
You're like Carmen. Like Carmen could do all kinds of stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah, he did.
Well, I mean, for me, that was a fun thing. I really enjoyed it. And when I was done with it, a guy came along and offered me £15,000 if I would sell it to him.
Wow.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Wow.
And I said, well, what are you going to do with it? He said, this is 2009. He said, we're going to put it out next year. And I said, no, I want it out now, because the credit crunch had just happened. And I felt the record was really important for people to be encouraged. And so the idea of putting it back a year would defeat that purpose. So I turned down the money.
Wow.
And we put the record out, and it went on. My plugger at the time, who didn't, like, a total atheist, anti-God, very militant atheist, I would say. He said, do not release this record. I said, I have to release it. I put it on social media. It's here. I can't just not release it.
Gospel Road.
Yeah. And he said, well, don't plug it. His job was to go to radio. I said, well, that'll mean you won't get paid. Okay, well, just give me 25 copies. And 3 Feet from Gold, we'd given away 800 promotional copies. With Gospel Road, we gave away 25.
Wow.
Gospel Road went all over the radio.
Wow.
Became most requested song, most requested album of the year. We ended up selling out the Grand Opera House in Belfast. It became a massively breakthrough record. And I didn't do any, like, we literally just gave him 25 copies. There was no press release. He just stuck them in the cubby holes of some DJs, and people played the record.
Wow.
Now, isn't it funny? Like, I did the record for fun.
Yeah.
I put it out because I said I would.
Yeah.
I didn't promote it heavily, and I didn't sell the record in any way, and I didn't take the big payout. I just said, in fact, he started at 10 grand, and when I said no, he went 15. And I could have used the dough, you know, but I just, no. So my heart came before money. It came before my career. It just was, I believe in the record. I want it out. Let's put it out.
Wow.
And it became a massive success. And we ended up selling thousands of that record.
Well, you know what I'm doing after this interview?
Well, it's my most streamed. Glory, Glory is my most streamed song. And Gospel Road is my most, like, popular record.
Okay.
And I often wonder about that. Like, is it because it was fun to do? You know, because sometimes you can make a record from your head, and you're paying attention to making all the right moves. But with that one, it was all heart. It was all fun, and it was all joy.
You took your time, like your wife said. And
and it was fun.
Song. Wow, tremendous. Well, I just want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And I thank you for sharing from your heart and being honest and open about the ups and downs in your career and your life, and not putting on airs and trying to be somebody you're not, but just being real open and real, being real.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it. And I'm sure my listeners are going to appreciate it. And
they're
they're
thank you
going
very much for your time.
Thank you.
Guys for
Thank you.
going to all this trouble.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been worth it. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Of my King, for the glory of my King, hallelujahs I will sing.